Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Bailey's Best. Brian Bailey with Zach Kaplan. Lots to talk about. We've got high school baseball, high school softball. We've got college baseball galore, and we've got those Carolina Hurricanes. And if you're watching us right now, they're getting ready to drop the puck in Raleigh for Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals. Has a nice ring to it, doesn't it?
It really does. They've been able to get here now 2 years in a row. The question, or I should say 2 of the last few years, but the question is, there you go, nice way to start the podcast. But the question is, can they overcome that hurdle? And that's the question. I just came into the studio after cutting some sound bites that we'll run on our newscast previewing the game as we tape this here on early Wednesday afternoon, but early Thursday afternoon. Wow.
You're white hot. You're white hot.
The Canes are a lot hotter than I am to start this podcast. The question is, can they overcome that hurdle?
Yeah.
It's been a bugaboo, whether they played Tampa Bay, whether they played Florida. Now you get a team north of the border in Montreal, a team they did beat on their way to the Stanley Cup in 2006. Now they got to beat them again in 2026 to get to the Stanley Cup final.
Do you know how the Canes fared against Montreal during the regular season?
Lost all three.
I didn't know that until this morning. I was doing some research on it. Didn't realize. I knew they lost the last matchup because that was in Raleigh.
Yep.
I think it was 3-1. But they lost all 3 meetings. They're the only Eastern Conference team to do that to Carolina this year. So there's that. But you look at the fact that the Hurricanes have 2 sweeps. They played 8 games. And it's been a month, right? And then you look at Montreal, they've played the most. 2 7-game series, that's 14. And 2 7-game, when you play the 7th game of a series, the emotions that brings about, and you get over that hump and you go to your next series. I mean, these guys haven't had a chance to rest at all. So I think what we're going to see later on tonight, either Carolina just whips Montreal in this first game, or Montreal keeps that momentum going. The big question always is it rest or is it rust? When you take this much time off, and I didn't realize this until I was reading something about it, it's been 107 years since a team has had an 11-day break during the Stanley Cup playoffs. That's crazy.
And it's coming off of a break between the first and second rounds that was almost as long. And that's the question, right? Is how do they come out? How do they look? I just don't think with this team it will be an issue. I'll say that before the game starts. I don't think it will be an issue. I think they're so locked in on what they have to do. Tired of hearing about, conference finals coming up short and, not being able to get over the hump. And I do think they'll come out fired up. It's at home. Also, Montreal has gone to overtime in both of those game 7s. So it's not even you're playing 60, but you're playing more than that. Both of those games. And it's so interesting that one team has played the minimum and one team has played the maximum as far as hockey.
The tale of 2 cities for sure. And you look at this Carolina Hurricane hockey team and Freddie Anderson, who's been unbelievable in goal. He was asked, what's the toughest part about a break like this? And he said, answering the same questions over and over. And he kind of got a chuckle with some of the media members. But he's right. I mean, when we take this long, what do you ask when you go into those press meetings and stuff? Because really it's the same thing over and over and over. It's Groundhog Day again and again, waiting to play. And they finally got a chance. I think one of them said the other night that we've had a chance to watch all the games. Now we get a chance to go back on the ice and play. I think it's going to be an unbelievable crowd. I mean, it's just going to be, it's a different level every step you go on the way to the Stanley Cup Finals. And I think you think about it, you win this one, you're 3 wins away from a berth in the Stanley Cup Championship Series.
And really, both buildings are going to be 2 of the most raucous in the NHL on any given night, and especially in the playoffs. But Bell Center, I think, is always talked about as one of the buildings right up there with Carolina, with Lenovo Center. That's tough to play in. Bell Center is different. Lenovo is cramped and tiny, and everyone talks about the visitor locker room, how horrendous it is. Bell Center's huge. Bell Center is the biggest building in the league as far as capacity. That'll be an interesting challenge for the Hurricanes once they go up there later in the week. But Lenovo Center, I mean, we've been in it plenty of times for the playoffs and know just how loud it gets. We'll see, who they have doing the siren and that kind of deal. But it's going to be really interesting to see, how Carolina comes out and really just how excited both cities are. Montreal has not had the Canadiens in a conference final in a long time. They technically did in 2020, but there were about 0 fans there. there. So I don't really consider that a similar experience.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you look at everything that, Carolina comes out of the Hartford Whalers. They become the Carolina Hurricanes. Montreal is one of the original teams.
The original.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's you go way back in the history of hockey. And just look at some of those pictures if you want to Google something and go back and look at what hockey looked like when Montreal, and the NHL started to what it is today. It's really something. Yeah, no helmets. And those guys were absolute studs. What do you think the key to the series is?
I think it's finding other ways of scoring for Carolina. And they've been better. I think they were better towards the end of the series with the Flyers at finding goals from guys that weren't Logan Stankoven, Taylor Hall, and Jackson Blake. But they got to unlock that top line. And I think this is a series where you might start to see that. There's been talk, at least earlier in the playoffs, about Aho and Jarvis and the lack of production. I think they're playing hurt. Both guys played in the Olympics. Neither's really had a break, ironically, until now.
Yeah.
And so maybe that'll help them because it's been a slower start to the playoffs for them. The Canes with their bottom six forwards, they've gotten the defensive contributions they've needed, and they've had just enough scoring. But you want to see it from Aho and Jarvis and Svechnikov if they keep him with them, which I believe this morning they had them on the line rushes together. So, you want to see something from them, and it'll be interesting to see how Montreal attacks, because do they send their top defensive pairing out to stop that Stankoven line that's been so effective in these playoffs? Really has been the story for Carolina as far as scoring goes, and it's kind of a pick your poison when it comes to trying to stop the Canes on that side of the puck.
I think one of the other keys, the Canes just can't commit silly penalties. They've got to stay out of the penalty box, because all of a sudden that equalizes everything. And when you get guys in the penalty box, and then you're waiting on trying to get those guys out, trying to kill those penalties off. So I think that's going to go a long way as well. And this Hurricane team is pretty smart, although they've had times in the two sweeps that they've been penalized and had to overcome some things. So we'll have to wait and see how that one goes. Game 1 is tonight. Game 2 in Raleigh is Saturday night, and then games 3 and 4, except for Montreal, Monday night is game 3. How about that for a holiday? Take the family to the beach, get home, pop up a cold one, and watch the Canes play on Monday night. Should be a lot of fun. Let's take a break here on Bailey's Best. Back with more. We'll talk baseball, college baseball, after this. All right, welcome back to Bailey's Best. Brian Bailey with Zach Kaplan, our sports team right here from WNCT Channel 9. When you think of college baseball this time of the year, the ACC tournaments in Charlotte, the American tournament down in Clearwater, Florida, it's a great time of the year, and basically these tournaments are all to prepare teams for the NCAA tournament. But some teams have work to do. Big question in Greenville, how much work does East Carolina have to do, if any?
The big thing is sweeping FAU to end the regular season. If they only took 2 out of 3, obviously if they lost that series, you really would have been in a position where East Carolina would have had to win the American tournament to really feel good at all about having a spot. But in my opinion, if they can get to the American Championship game, play UTSA probably in that championship, although upsets happen in this tournament, you really feel like pretty good about where they sit on Selection Monday. That's the question for East Carolina. They really looked the part last weekend, kind of finding some things and having a 4-0 week to end the regular season. Now if you can take it to Clearwater, where they got hot last year, obviously that was the story at the end of last season, and now got to find it again in the Florida Heat.
They've had great success down in Clearwater, Florida, had some great times down there, and some of the projections have East Carolina not getting in. Some projections have East Carolina going to Chapel Hill, which would be very convenient for a lot of folks. And we've gone to Chapel Hill before for a regional and for a super regional. I think you look at that. Others say they may go to Atlanta and Georgia Tech is loaded.
Where the players play. Yep.
Yeah, they are really, really good. So I think they've got their work cut out for them. You got to give them a lot of credit, though, because of all the injuries they've had. And they've had some killer injuries on the pitching staff. That's just, it's hard enough to go out and recruit arms at an elite level to win a College World Series. I mean, East Carolina has always, they haven't gone to Omaha, and we all know that. But they recruit. Yeah, they recruit to a level that not only can they go to Omaha, that they can compete with the nation's best, and they can win in Omaha. And the arms that they had to start the year, I mean, I really thought that hey, and Xavier came to town in the opening series and took the series, and that kind of set everybody back a little bit. Then the injury started coming in, but for those guys to rally like they have, and when that offense is clicking, and they're really good.
Yeah, and to me, that's the story of this postseason. That's the big question of how far can this team go. I feel better about the pitching than I do the hitting. I feel like they found something with Ryan Towers has been an effective Friday night guy now, and kind of out of nowhere, coming off injury. I know Cliff believed in him and believed he had the ability to do that, but it's one thing to believe in it, it's another to actually execute and do it. And he's started to really find himself. Ethan Norby has started to settle into more of the pitcher that we thought he would be. You're probably getting your final chances to see him in an East Carolina uniform, by the way. So wouldn't it be great to see him go out and have an excellent postseason performance? Well, maybe not so great if you want him to come back for another year. But, Towers and Norby have been great, and they've been able to piece it together on Sundays. Luke Payne is, taking the ball to start those games, and then they've been able to put it together in the bullpen after him. So the pitching you feel good about. The question is, can the hitting turn around? And, we talked a little bit, at least off air, Austin Irby's a guy who's expected to, really power this lineup, has had an underwhelming season, but it was last year at this time.
He was incredible last year in the postseason.
Especially in Conway.
Right.
He turned it on. So it's not out of the question that he could be a guy who comes out and, really has an excellent performance and can save them. And, they need to find the hitting or really sustain the hitting that they found in that Florida Atlantic series. That's the question for me as far as how far can this team go.
They got to find the consistency, both hitting and defensively, and then try to piece together the pitching staff. The ACC in Charlotte, and of course, when you think of ACC baseball, you think of East Carolina's rivalries with North Carolina, with NC State. Elliott Avent comes out after State was ousted from the ACC tournament. He has announced his retirement, which was not shocking, but I think people were wondering what was going to happen with that.
It's the end of an era for sure. You think about 30 years. I mean, you're probably one of the only people who remembers whoever was coaching NC State before him. I don't mean to call you old, but
I am
indirectly. You think about just going to 3 College World Series, winning over 1,100 games. I was just looking through our archives and I found a shot of him, Cliff Godwin, and Mike Fox. And when you think about college baseball in this state, I think those would be 3 of the top people you think about. And just the amount of success that he's had there and that they've had as a program. 21 will always kill them. I think both you and I both agree they were the hottest team going in Omaha.
For sure.
COVID, they kind of got
that was
forced out. And, you think about that'll always haunt them, but I mean, just a guy who loved NC State through and through. Seems like Chris Hart, the associate head coach, will be the guy to replace him. Maybe kind of a Dean Smith and Bill Guthridge situation where he kind of had a handpicked success.
And Cliff Godwin and Elliott Avent had a little bit of a rocky relationship at times, but I think they really got things together late in Elliott's career, and really just the whole thing with the ALS and treating it like they did with the numbers. And Chris Combs, number 26, I believe, for NC State, and East Carolina wearing the 23 for Keith LeClaire. What a great cause that is to raise money, awareness for ALS and the fight, because both programs were affected by it. But I think they kind of came together. That shot of the 2 hugging is just it's just unbelievable. I'd forgotten about it. You were looking at it the other day, and just really a neat shot. And
And it was over canceled games too. I think
I think it was too.
They definitely patched.
Somebody got rained out, and then they practiced or something like that. But so we wish Elliott Avent the very best. He always treated us well, so wish him the very best in his retirement. All right, let's take another commercial break right now. Back with more on Bailey's Best. We'll talk high school baseball coming up next when our show continues. Welcome back to Bailey's Best. Let's talk baseball now, high school baseball. We really thought we had a couple of future state champions in 6A J.H. Rose, 7A D.H. Conley, 3A Eaton Grifton. They were top seeds in the East, and Black Friday got them. In the 4th round of the state playoffs, and it was a stunning night, wasn't it?
I think, as far as my nights in Greenville, since I took this job, I'd say one of the more surprising nights based on results that I've had. And it's been 2.5 years for me. You've been here a lot longer, but to lose it's kind of felt like the Red Wedding episode of Game of Thrones, where it's like, one thing happened, then another thing happened.
I didn't see the Game of Thrones.
All
I
right,
can't
well,
follow that. I tried to watch it. I did. Morgan Ayler's, my good friend, told me you got to watch it. I watched a couple episodes, couldn't figure out which king was which queen. I couldn't figure it out.
It really, though, you were at JH Rose that night. I was at DH Conley. Conley, of course, ran the longest. So, I'm watching the other games. I'm keeping an eye on other games. You and I are texting back and forth, and really was stunned as we kept getting more and more results that, I think it was Rose lost first, and then South Central had a lead. Cardinal Gibbons came back and beat them, and then Aiden Grifton was the last one, and then Conley went to extras. So just an unbelievable night. You feel for the seniors. You think about some of the people that we have relationships with, and we've watched play high school baseball for 3 years, and some of them will play in college. Others have played their final game, and that's kind of the hard part, the real part for these kids of knowing that their careers ended, and just in surprising ways.
And some of those players will play other sports, but for the most part, when you're in baseball at Rose or Conley, it's a 24/7 type deal, and you're always hitting, you're always doing something, and the guys work really, really hard, and it was really hard to watch because I don't think parents or players understand just how emotional it is when it's the end. I mean, I still remember my last high school football game, and that was 50 years ago. And I remember taking my jersey off, and somebody said, you'll never wear that again. And I thought to myself, he's right. You don't go down the street and put a uniform on and play football out in the street. You just don't do it.
No.
So it was really, and I thought, man. But at that time, you're tired of practicing, you're tired of playing. We didn't make the playoffs, so it was over. Had a winning record, but still, I think the parents, especially when you have a state championship, caliber team.
Yeah.
Not that they were definitely going to win the state championship, but they had enough talent. They had, especially Conley's case, because they knew if they got into a best of 3, they had better pitching than just about anybody else. And I just think that, and even Rose, their pitching was pretty deep, and I think that, and RV's won so many games through the years that you just don't expect something like that to happen. But I'll never forget the look on RV's face. He said, that's baseball, and it teaches you a lot about life, and it really does. Sports teaches you all about life. That's why I get on my soapbox all the time and tell people how important sports is, because it teaches you all about life, and that's just you don't win everything. You don't get a trophy every time you go out, and so it was a tough lesson to learn in Pitt County for those teams.
I'll say with Conley too, you looked at, they were going to get Cardinal Gibbons in the Eastern Finals, and that was a team that they had played and beat in the regular season, a team that the seniors on this team lost to their sophomore year, and that came to Greenville and knocked them out. So it's going to be a chance for redemption for them. For Rose, I kind of looked at the 6A bracket where Charlotte Catholic had gotten upset, TC Roberson had gotten upset, and it really, like you said, it kind of like the road kind of cleared out for them in the West. If they'd been able to get there,
the Rose lost to a 12 seed. I mean, that's a team that they weren't very highly seeded at all,
and they would have played Southern Lee, a team that also knocked them out 2 years ago. So it would have been pretty ironic there. Aiden Grifton lost to Whiteville.
Whiteville's known always good.
Yeah.
I mean, just a great history in baseball, and even though they were what were they? 4?
They were a 4 seed. Mackenzie Gore's alma mater, recent MLB name, and it's just kind of surprising there. And they would have played Midway, who also knocked Aiden Grifton out either last year or 2 years ago. So it really would have been a lot of chances at revenge for some of those seniors that could get teams back that had ended their years previous. In South Central, Cardinal Gibbons, of course, all 4 had great seasons, but you ultimately you feel a little empty, but still a lot to be proud of for those teams.
Just blessed with all the great coaches. Led by Ronald Vincent, the all-time winningest coach in any sport in North Carolina's baseball or North Carolina's sports history. But just great coaches, and so we congratulate all those guys for jobs well done. You can't sit there and go to the 4th round and say you're a failure, because you're not. No. I mean, you really had a lot to be proud of, and those teams certainly fought all year long. Let's take one final break. We'll come back and wrap up this edition. We'll talk softball after this. All right, welcome back as we wrap up this edition of Bailey's Best. Talk a little softball. Don't want to leave out Beargrass baseball because they kind of played, in the 1As, they skip a week and they kind of get lost in the shuffle, but they're very much a part of what's happening for sure.
Yeah, and I was out there on Tuesday. What day is it? I don't even know.
They're running together.
Tuesday night, and it's funny because they won last Tuesday, and they won. I'm like, in my head, I'm like, okay, we got at least one team will be in the Eastern Finals. But I expected 3 or 4. I thought it was going to be a lot more. And then I was kind of talking to their coach, Terry Perry, about it. I'm like, hey, you guys are the last ones left in the entire East. Really east of 95. I mean, they are the last team. I don't count. Wilmington's kind of separate, but they've had a great season in their own right. They had to, they had to win a rivalry game against Northside to get to the Eastern Finals. And as we tape this, they have game 2 tonight down at Lake Waccamaw against the Gators of East Columbus. They actually have Gators there, unlike Williamston and Martin County. We both think they should be the Mustangs, not the Gators.
It should be the Mustangs.
We digress. A great win for them though in game 1, and we'll see if they can get it done in game 2.
Let's give credit too to D.H. Conley and J.H. Rose. When you play a best of 3 and you come out and you get your butt whipped in the first game, especially Conley, because they were at home.
Yeah.
And that team from Heritage can hit the softball. I mean, I coached softball for years and years, and I didn't have anybody get hit like those girls. They could hit it. And for Conley to go on the road and capture game 2, so give Wayne Deans and those girls credit. Man, that's a huge win. They get set for their game 3 on Friday night. And then Rose, they at least got to come home for game 2, but they still were playing a number 1 seed, a powerhouse in Union Pines, and they came through and they look good. They've got a chance to go to the state now.
Yeah, in Union Pines, like we said, was 25-1 this year. I mean, so that was their second loss all season, and that was a really impressive job at the plate for J.H. Rose, who is as loose, and I would say actually both teams, as loose as softball teams as you could have. Conley, they're wearing the wigs in the dugout. Like, they're having just an absolute blast. And these girls, they're freshmen now, are the team that won the Little League Softball World Series for Pitt County a couple years ago. So they're not going to be daunted by the moment. They played on ABC in front of a national television audience. And the girls, the other girls, the upperclassmen, played in a state championship last year against South Caldwell. They get somebody different if they win this year. In 6A, with Rose, like, you're playing with house money now. You go down there, back to Moore County, nothing to lose because, everyone kind of left you for dead after game 1, and they have had as much fun as anybody. It's like a dance party in their dugouts, so they'll both be loose going into game 3, and 2 programs that really have a lot of fun and have had great seasons.
Always cool to see a guy like Keita Sneed, who was a Hall of Famer. J.H. Rose is an athlete, and he raised his family in Greenville, and his daughter coaches with him on that staff, and he's got a daughter playing for him on that team. So Keita's done a great job, as has Wayne Deans, obviously, at D.H. Conley, because as I said, I coached softball for a long time, and coaching girls is different than coaching guys, and Keita will tell you that because he coaches on the football staff as well for Will Bland. But they've done just an amazing job, and congratulations to all the teams as we continue to battle and try to make it to the state championships.
Yeah, don't want to leave out Beargrass softball, who we kind of mentioned off the top, but come back to them, and West Carteret softball, who, as we tape this, has a chance tonight in Morehead City to punch their ticket and really shock Southeast Alamance, who's the top seed. West Carteret's had an outstanding season. They've had a lot of community support in Morehead City. Everyone thinks of Big Rock and thinks of, just hanging out at the beach, but what a run that would be and what a story that would be if they can knock off the top seed, do it at home, and go to the state championship. So good luck to West Carteret and Beargrass Charter as well. They've had great seasons.
And it's kind of what the North Carolina High School Athletic Association wanted, going to the 8 classes, and they've built the excitement and that kind of thing. And we've got lots of stuff still to come. That's going to do it for this edition of Bailey's Best. For Zach Kaplan, I'm Brian Bailey. We'll see you next time.